kids, it's me. I am ready to read chapter 2 of Humphrey. I actually recorded it yesterday and I thought I posted it on my YouTube, but there's some kind of trouble. It's not posting. So I think it may be too long of a video. So I'm going to keep this one short. I'm going to break it up into two videos. Okay, so this is video 1 and this is chapter 2, and it's called The Worst First Day Gets Worse. So the final bell rang, and everybody had taken a seat except the girl in the wheelchair, who was already sitting. There was still one empty chair left. Mrs. Brisbane went to the door and looked out in the hall. "Oh, there you are," she said. She opened the door wider, and a boy walked in. "You must be the missing student," Mrs. Brisbane said. "I'm not missing," the boy answered. "I'm right here." I thought he'd be in big trouble, so I was surprised when Mrs. Brisbane smiled and directed him to the empty chair. Then she stood in front of the class. "Good morning, class," Mrs. Brisbane said. "Last year I had one of the best classes ever, but I think this class will be even better." "Better?" I squeaked. "That was the best, best, best class in the whole wide world." "Boing, boing," Og agreed. I wasn't sure what I said was true. On the one paw, I couldn't imagine a better class than the one that we had last year. But on the other paw, it was the only class that I'd ever been in. But where had my classmates gone? "I'm going to rearrange the seating later in the day," Mrs. Brisbane said. "But for now, I'll take attendance." "Are you listening, Og?" I asked my neighbor. I can never be sure because he doesn't have any ears that I've ever seen, but he seems to understand me most of the time. Are we dreaming? I wondered. So far, the morning felt like one of those dreams where everything seems almost the same as in real life, but a lot weirder. For instance, I once had a dream where all of my human friends were rolling around in a giant hamster ball. That was a very fun dream. Once I dreamed that the class was being taught by Mrs. Wright, the PE teacher. That wasn't a funny dream because she was always blowing her very loud whistle, which is painful to the small, sensitive ears of a hamster. Again, Og didn't answer me. Maybe frogs don't dream. Then Mrs. Brisbane began to call out the strange words she had been saying before. It turns out that they were names. "Kelsey Kirkpatrick?" "Here," the red-haired girl said, still rubbing her arm. "Harry Ito?" Mrs. Brisbane called out. Harry was the boy who had been late to class. She called on Simon, who answered, "Present." "Present? I don't see any presents." "Was it somebody's birthday?" "Rosie Rodriguez," Mrs. Brisbane said. The girl in the wheelchair waved her hand and shouted, "Here." The boy named Thomas answered, next followed by a couple of girls, Phoebe and Holly. "Are you paying attention, Og?" I asked my friend. Og splashed a little, but he didn't answer, and then something odd happened. "Paul?" Mrs. Brisbane asked. Right away, not one, but two voices replied, "Here." One of them was Small Paul from last year. The other was Paul, the tall boy. Mrs. Brisbane smiled. "I forgot. This year we have two Pauls in our class, Paul Fletcher and Paul Green. Now, how will we ever tell you apart?" That was an easy question. One of them was small, 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 and the other one was tall, tall, tall. Small Paul and Tall Paul eyed each other. Neither of them looked happy to have another Paul in the class. "What did your teacher do last year?" she asked. "He wasn't in my class," Small Paul said. "I went to another school," Tall Paul added. Mrs. Brisbane nodded. "I see. Do either of you have nicknames?" Both boys shook their heads. "Well, for now, let's say Paul F. and Paul G. Is that all right with you?" she asked. Both boys nodded. Then Mrs. Brisbane called out one more name. "Joseph." The boy with curly brown hair shifted in his chair, but he didn't answer. Mrs. Brisbane looked around the class. "Is Joseph here?" The boy with curly brown hair nodded. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "But it's not Joseph, it's Joey. Just Joey Jones." Mrs. Brisbane smiled. "All right, then. Just Joey it is. Now, I'm Very excited to get to know you and for you to get to know me. In case you don't know, I am Mrs. Brisbane. The teacher wrote her name on the board. There are 2 other members of the class you need to know, she said. Then she wrote my name on the board. Humphrey is our classroom hamster, she said. Everybody, and I mean everybody, looked at me. Next, she wrote Og's name on the board. Og is our classroom frog. You'll get to know them very well this year. You'll also have a chance to take Humphrey home for the weekend. I'll tell you more about that this afternoon, she said. The students all giggled and whispered and turned in their seats to look at us. Tell them they're in the wrong room, I suggested. Some of the students close to the cage giggled when they heard me go squeak, squeak, squeak. The teacher ignored me. First, let's get to know each other a little bit better. Would you take out your summer boxes? Summer boxes? I squeaked. What are they, Og? Summer was sunshine and campfires and unsqueakable fun. Summer wasn't something you could just put in a box. I'm not sure Og could hear me since he was splashing like crazy in his tank, but the strange students in the class seemed to understand. They reached into their backpacks and pulled out boxes, all kinds of boxes, and they put them on their desk. How did they know about the boxes? I squeaked to Og. Why didn't we know? Og had no answer. During the previous school year, I tried hard to keep up with my friends' homework, taking tests along with them, writing papers and even poems. Oh, that's our... Hang on one sec, kids. Okay, so guys, this video is 7 minutes long, so I'm going to stop here and I will post it and I will continue the rest of the chapter in the next video. Okay? Bye.